greatest gratitude. And for the people who don't know Maha Al-Selek, she's a very well-known software engineer in SME. And today she's here to give us mentorship in native Android app development by using Kotlin. So it's going to be a great session. So I hope everyone tune in. And Maha, I'll get back to you. And please, you can have the stage to introduce yourself, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So we can get started.
Yes, sure. You can say it. You can start, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Um, are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where is it? Okay, so thank you all for joining us today. And I'm gonna be leading a native Android app development with Kotlin workshop for today. So let me start off by introducing myself. So my name is Maha. I'm a software engineer at CME and a Women Tech Makers ambassador. My journey has started since a very, very young age where I've always been curious about technology. And it started out with video games. I have always loved playing video games and using computer programs. And that led me to ask myself questions. How are video games created? What does it take to make them? And what effort it needs and all. But I was very, very young to understand this stuff. But I did a lot of research at a young age. But I had, of course, limited capabilities and couldn't really much understand. But I did try at a very young age to start. And I did create a few games and stuff back then. And moving forward, I managed to pursue a degree in computer science at university. And at the final year at university, I got the chance to pick a course. It was optional and it was about Android app development. And ever since, I have been carrying it with me to this day. That making it, I have gotten 6 years, over 6 years of experience building Android applications. And ever since I have started an Android application, like at my final year, I have become community leader as I have loved mentoring and helping others grow in tech, as I have shared my knowledge and tried my best to help others grow in this field through Android communities, and mainly they were on Facebook groups related to Android development. And I have taken a part in 2019 and around 2020 or 2021 in creating a YouTube channel. So some of you might know me as, and the name might be familiar of the Ambitious Coder. I have taken it down, but now I'm starting to bring it back up again and share my knowledge again with everyone. And a very fun fact, I'm a curious learner, a person who enjoys exploring technologies and video games and sports. So let's take a look at the agenda we have for today's workshop. So for today, we are going to take a look, have an overview on Android Studio and the emulator. We're going to take a look about this designing responsive UI layouts, navigation and intents in Android. We're going to talk about the best practices for clean and accessible apps and have a look at Android app architecture basics. And in the end, I'm gonna share some researches and give my opinion about the path and roadmap for taking the a path for becoming an Android developer. And as well, we're gonna have a Q&A. So let's go ahead and break the ice. So tell me, where are you joining us from today? From which country you watching us today?
Okay. I think massive of us are from Ethiopia.
Uh,
Uh,
I can see people from Pakistan, Egypt, and Ethiopia. So we have variety, Ghana as well. That's a great. It's all nice to meet you all. And yeah. So drop a word or an emoji that describes your mood right now. Are you excited to join us today on this workshop? How are you feeling? Are you happy or share with us? I can see everyone is excited. Yeah. What are you looking forward the most in today's workshop? Let me hear your thoughts. What's the most thing you're excited for today? Ready to learn. Yeah, we're gonna learn a lot today. Definitely. Grasp the concepts of Kotlin. Yes, it's all about Kotlin today. To get into Android application development, get solid clarity and understanding in the basic fundamentals. I work with Java a lot and I need to get to know about Kotlin. Yeah, I see everyone is excited to start uh, with our workshop today, learning Android. Uh, okay, so I'm not sure if my presentation is showing in full screen or not. Okay, so let's get started. What is Android app development? So, as you know, there is Android development and we have iOS development, and as well, we have something called hybrid app development, which is based on having a single code base to develop applications for both platforms, iOS and Android. But for today, we are going to be talking about native Android development. So, what is native Android development? Native Android app development means building apps specifically for Android using tools and languages officially supported by Google. Now, to get this started, we have some tools and prerequisites that we need. And starting off, we need, of course, some coding knowledge. And with that, I mean to know a little bit like the basics and fundamentals of programming. And that includes like knowing how and what is a variable and how to use it, initiate it, how function works, what are conditionals and loops and functions, and as well some object oriented programming. And since we are doing native Android app development, that means we're gonna be having to use the languages that are officially supported to develop Android apps. And for Android, that's gonna be Java and Kotlin. However, Java is now set as a legacy and not supported. So Kotlin is the new trend, and it's what everyone has been using lately. Now, you might be wondering if you know a different language, assuming Python or anything else, but you want to start Android app development and you're wondering, is it gonna be easy for me or I'm gonna take time or it's gonna be hard and difficult? And here I'm gonna tell you something that stuck with me ever since I entered university, as it was the first sentence the instructor would repeat always, and it is that all programming languages have the same logic but different syntax. So if you know the fundamentals of programming in any language, it's going to be so easy for you to navigate and learn new languages and even use them. Of course, it's going to take you a little bit of time to get used to the syntax, but it's not going to take you a lot. And of course, it's going to depend on the efforts you put and the time you put and how much you practice on it. But generally, it is absolutely possible and very easy if you have a solid basic of the programming fundamentals. And as the tools, we're going to be using Android Studio, which is also the official IDE we use to create our Android projects and develop our applications on. And as well, you can see I have mentioned prerequisites having a laptop and internet. And for a reason, I have mentioned it, as most of the beginners face issues when setting up first time their Android projects or setting up Android Studio. And most of the time, they don't realize that the problem is in not having a proper and stable internet connection or not having a proper laptop specs. And personally speaking, from my journey, I was starting out with a very low specs laptop, and it took me. It was late for me till I realized that the problem was from my laptop, where like the Android Studio would show me errors, even though the code is 100% correct. And one of the things that most people face, and mostly it's using and setting up the Android Studio emulator, is when they set up everything correctly and they follow the guide, they end up with a black screen or emulator not running properly, although they followed every step as it is and tried every solution out there. However, in some laptops, if the laptop doesn't have an Intel graphics card, you may face these issues. And personally, I have also faced this issue. And for internet, it's so important to be connected to the internet, especially when you're connecting you're creating your application for the first time. As the first time you create your application, Android Studio is going to be connecting to the internet and downloading some dependencies and libraries that you are going to need to build applications. And upon every library and dependency you add, you also need to make sure you have internet connected. So, why do we go native when there is a lot of other solutions? The reason we go native is because it runs smoothly, the UI is smooth, and it's best for performance and battery optimization. And above all, native has full hardware access, which means if you are developing Android applications and your app relies heavily on hardware features, let's say a GPS or a camera, then these are hardware features that your app needs. And using native app development, it's so easy to access them, and because it's officially the system, the native language, so you don't have limitations, unlike when you're using hybrid. In hybrid development, you may face some issues or difficulties, and at some point, using hybrid in case you want to use heavily rely on hardware features, you may end up even writing native. I mean, in the end, it's built over native. So let's now take a look at Android Studio. Let me stop sharing this and share my Android Studio. Okay. So this is what Android Studio looks like the first time you are going to run it. Now you might not have the new Flutter project thing here. I just have it because I have a Flutter installed. So in order for us to start and create our very first Android project, we're gonna go ahead and click on the new project. And here we're gonna have a variety of options. We can see phones and tablets, templates, and Wear OS, which is for smart watches devices. And we have even for television and also automotives. But since we are going to be mobile, we're going to do mobile app development, we are going to be choosing and picking the phone and tablet option. Now here as well, we can see we have a lot of options here. So we have empty activity, we have the Gemini API starter, we have basic views activities, and a lot of options. Now as well, you might not have the multi-platform options as I have them because I have multi-platform installed on my end. And now there's a slight difference between those activities and
Sorry.
this empty activity. As this empty activity that has this logo means it's using Compose.
Maha,
And these,
help you
yes.
from please. Some of the participants are saying your screen is not showing.
Oh, let me stop and redo it.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about
It's okay.
that. Okay. Okay, let me share the whole screen. Okay, now it's visible.
It is visible to me, but yes, I think, yeah, it is visible. Yes.
Okay. So as I was saying, I'm going to be creating a new project through this option. I have additional Flutter option just because I have Flutter installed. And in here as well, I have multi-platform options because I have Kotlin multi-platform installed on my end. And I was talking about the options on the side, which are templates. We have phone and tablet templates. We have Wear OS, which is for Samsung watches or like smart watches in general. And we have for television and we have for automotive. So we can develop for these through Android Studio. But since we're doing mobile app development, we're gonna be using phone and tablet. So as we can see, we have a lot of options, a lot of templates, and we have this one that has this logo, which is the Compose logo, which is a modern development UI kit, and we have the normal ones. So these normal ones are using still our templates using XML. And this one is using Compose, and the Gemini API starter is simply a fun small project using Gemini APIs, and it's quite fun. It's also done in Compose. For today, we're gonna be checking out the empty activity, and we're gonna be exploring Compose as it is the modern UI kit for Android development. I'm gonna go ahead and click next. So as you can see, we have some options over here. So, and the name is where we can pick the project name, and I'm gonna call it Women Tech Makers Android Workshop. And for the package name, as we can see, it's named com, and it has my name and the application name. Now, usually in the middle, it would be carrying the company the application you're developing belongs to. And we have, of course, the save location where we want to save our project. And we have an option to select minimum SDK. As we know, Android devices have constantly software updates. So you can be today on Android 9 and tomorrow an update is released and you get updated to Android 10. So here we have the option to select which SDKs, the minimum SDK that our application is going to support. And as example, we have the Android 7 by default selected. And we have also lower option. The lower option is Android 5. Now, if you get to select the lowest, then you have to keep in mind that in some futures and in some stuff you're coding, what is implemented in Android 5, like in a coding and logical way, can be different a little bit what's the implemented on Android 8. And then you're gonna be having to handle it case by case by checking, like by checking the device itself SDK, if it's lower or higher from the SDK, like the future you're working on supports and such. But in general, Android 7 is fine to go through and to choose, as less people now are having these Android 6 and like below Android 7, as they are now like old models. And you can as well support only the latest, the very, very latest application. But it's always recommended to support the most SDKs you can, so that if someone has an older version, you don't really block him from using your app or even downloading it. And for the build configuration language, we're gonna be keeping it as Kotlin DSL build Gradle KTS, which is the recommended way. I'm gonna go ahead and click finish. And it's gonna take some time for Gradle. As I said, it's importing and downloading dependencies and libraries needed. And in the meantime, we can take a quick look at the structure of Android Studio. Like by default, we can see a class open, which is called a main activity. And we can see it extends a component activity and has a function that sets content, and as well as setting the theme and the UI and all. And we can see here we have a composable function called a greeting, and we have a preview in it. So this is what's nice about Compose. You can code and view your UI on the side, and it's all programmatic, unlike XML. XML is now counted a bit like legacy, and everyone is now adapting to Compose. XML maybe was a little bit easier for people to use, as it was based on drag and drop the UI components. However, Compose has a lot of pros. It's a little bit more easier to use, as it's already part of your Kotlin code. And it also reduces a lot of boilerplate that XML used to have. And as you can see here already, we have on the side our greeting text already being represented on the side. So let's take a look at more important files that are present in the Android project. So on the sides, we have the Android manifest file. So if I click it, this is basically, you can call it your application ID, as it contains everything related and about your application. So every activity you create, you need to declare it here. And for this one, we have an intent filter and counted as launcher, as this is the activity our application is going to be starting with, which is the class we have seen over here. And as well, you can see the label of the application. You can set your application icon and theme, and whether it supports RTL or not. And as well, on this place is where we also declare some important permissions. Don't you sometimes like open a certain app, let's say a map application, an application that has a map, and it asks you for, it pops up a bottom sheet or a dialog asking you to enable or grant permission for location. And basically, this is as well where you include these permissions. And on the other side, we also have Gradle. So we have build a Gradle, which also carries the plugins and the dependencies that our application is going to be using. So we can see the namespace and the application ID defined here. So it's correct that we have defined these at the start where we were creating the project, but that doesn't mean that we can change these again and rename them. We can absolutely do it through this. And all as well, this is the minimum SDK. We can as well change it again later from here, target SDK and the version code. Basically, the version code and version name is your application version. Like, you know, when we download applications, sometimes we see notice in the settings, most of the time, it's a place like the version number of your app that installed, and like often it starts with the first release being 1.0, and then maybe if it has bug fixes it would be 1.1, and if it has like a complete stage phase completed development, then it's gonna be like 2.0 and such. And as well, we can see we have the build the futures compose set to true, since we are using compose in this project, so we need to have it enabled. And here we can see our dependencies, which are being read from the TOML file. So this is the TOML file where our dependencies are more organized and structured. So we can define the dependency version over here under the version section and define our libraries under the library section. And in case we have plugins, we can include them as well and set them up. And then they are being called through build a Gradle on the dependency section. And that was a quick look and a quick overview over the Android Studio project structure. Now let's have a look at the emulator. Now the emulator, you can find it here on the side, on the section that says Device Manager. Now I already have 3 devices installed and created, but you can always create a new one and add a new device from here. Like create a new device, and then you are able to get a list of devices and select one and then proceed. But I'm not gonna add one because I already have 3 created. And we can go ahead and launch one. So you can either run the emulator from here, or if you want to run the application directly on the emulator, you can go ahead, select the device you want. So right now I'm gonna be using the Pixel 6, and I'm gonna click run the app. And then it's gonna open the window, and it's gonna take a little bit of time to run. So now it's gonna run the current application. That's the default project that we have. And here we are. It says hello world, hello Android, sorry, and it's on top. It's just used to having hello world as a start in the programming as we learn. And basically that's how the emulator gets created and started. So I'm gonna minimize it for now, and let's dive into creating some UI. So let's first clean this a little bit. So I'm gonna go ahead, I need to create a screen. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a new package, and let's be organized and call the folder screens. And inside of it, I'll call my screen and my main screen. And then I'm gonna take the composable and move it here. So this is part of cleaning our code and keeping everything clean. Because imagine if I create multiple composables here, how will my file look like? It's gonna be hardly readable. So I have moved the text. I can delete this part, and I can also take the scaffold, the whole thing, and include it here. What happened? So I'll replace it here. So now we don't really need this because we're not passing it. Let's do it like that. And yeah, let's edit it a little bit. So now I just clean things up, and now I can call my main screen here. So I have not done anything yet. I just cleaned up and moved the logic and renamed it. Now also these are not needed because these were part of the scaffold below. And I'll move, or I can keep it here. It's fine. Let me move the preview as well to here. And this is called main screen preview. Always make sure that the functions you're naming are being named meaningful names, so that in case later you want to take a look and relook at your code, or someone else wants to have a look at your code, he has an idea what's going on just by reading. So it seems we have now a problem loading the composable. So we're calling the main screen, moved everything. And here we are. It's
I'm sorry, I think our guest is having a little bit of connection problem. So we're going to wait like 5 minutes to get her back in.
seems I have lost internet connection.
Yeah.
Where was it cut off? I'm sorry, I'm not sure why that happened. Okay. So let me share again my screen. So where did it cut off? Because I wasn't really aware.
I think you were talking about the last slide you were on right now.
Yeah, the upper in this one, I think.
Uh, was it on creation of the button or not?
Yes, we can start on the
There
creation
it
of button.
Okay, so I was creating a button by calling the component, and I simply added it to the scaffold. And we faced a problem, which is our UI now is overlapping. So how can we fix this? So one thing we can do is use our column or row components as well, and place our UI, the text and buttons inside of it. And now our components are showing above each other and perfectly fine, way much better than previously. Now, still something is not looking much right. Let's try and do some adjustments to make the UI a little bit better and responsive. And we can do the following using the modifier. So let's add some padding. Modifier dot padding. So let's say I want to have like 10.dp. That's like around like maybe 10 pixels on each side, like left, right, top, and bottom for the whole container. And let's make sure that our container also is filling the max size of the screen. And let's make our button fill the max width. I think it's not the text. It should be on the button. So I'm gonna add a modifier. A modifier that fill max width. So now we have a button that's filling the whole width and a text above it. And basically the button is not doing anything for now, but we can run it. And it's looking a little bit different now. So that could be due to some changes we have done. And let me remove the inner padding here because it's not needed. And let's move, sorry, this should be part of, move this to here. And let's make the button go down to the whole bottom of the screen. And that's gonna be through adding a spacer. And we can do that by giving it a modifier and weight, let's say 1F. And now it's gonna be displayed at the bottom, and we're gonna run. And now it's working. So a column, basically, if you have done XML previously, you know the linear layout and how the weight gets divided between the components. So when I'm setting the modifier to be 1, I'm making sure that it's taking up and filling up the space in between the components as much as it can. So let's go ahead now and take a look at the navigation. So in order to do navigation, we need to rely on a library that's called Compose Navigator. So let's go ahead and get the library dependency from the official website. So let's say Compose Navigator and navigation with Compose. This should be taking us to the library. So we have always refer to the documentation when you are lost about how you are going to implement a certain dependency, as it always have a guidance on how to use it and how to set it up. And for our case, we're gonna be setting it up as it says. We're gonna be adding it in the dependencies under the build Gradle. So if we go ahead and check our build Gradle, we can see that our dependencies are added a little bit differently, are added a bit differently than this. Now, this was and used to be the old method, but now we're using Kotlin DSL, which is a modern way and more organized way of handling libraries. So if I go ahead here, I can simply add it by creating the let's start by creating a variable to hold the version, navigator version, and the version was 290. And we're gonna name it Compose Navigator. Now, of course, there is a different way to handle as well, like without a library, but it's not from the best practices. So I'm trying to show you as much as I can best practices. Now, for the new way of implementing the dependency, we simply are going to take the first part before the 2 semicolons and add it under the group variable. And then we're gonna have the name, which represents the second part before, in between the 2 dots above each other. And then we're gonna have to call the version dot ref and use the variable that we created above, which is compose navigator version. And then we can sync, as it's not going to allow us to add it here unless it is synced. Otherwise, it's not really going to find it. So it's going to take some time in order to download the dependency, as I was saying. So, but does this mean that you can't really use this way? You can still use it this way, and it would be looking something like this. You'd need to follow a certain syntax, just like edit it a little bit. Now I'm not having this as a variable, so it's simply like this. But this is not not very good to use, as this is a better way to manage your dependencies and check them out. So I'm going to remove this and call the dependency that we added on in the toml file. I'm going to call libs dot I called it compose and dot navigator. Now it automatically takes the dash as a dot. It doesn't treat it as a dash, it takes it as a dot. And then again, I need to sync. And Now that the navigator is now installed, we can go ahead and start creating our nav host. So let's create our composable function and call it function nav host. And here we're gonna have a nav controller. Create nav controller and use the remember nav controller. And we're gonna here as well call the nav host, and we're gonna pass the nav controller to it, nav controller, and we have to pass as well as start. It seems I have imported something wrong. Okay, let me redo that. Nav host. I need the one that yes, this one. It takes a nav controller, and a start destination as a string. I did not create the start destination yet. We're gonna be creating them inside the nav host. Let's call this one app nav host because it's starting to be confusing. See the importance of having clear names. And here we're going to have a composable, and we're gonna have the name of our first screen. So I'm gonna call it main. And here I'm gonna be passing the main screen. So the start destination, now I can pass the main to be a start destination, which is this one. And I'm gonna be updating this to be like this. Now, how can I navigate? Let's create first a second screen. Let's call it our second screen. And let's have it similar to this. And second screen. This is a second screen preview and second screen. And let's change the text. Welcome to the second screen as an example. And now we need to pass the navigator to our screens if we want to navigate. So we're gonna be passing the nav controller, and as well I need to define my second screen over here and call it here as well, and remove the nav controller because my second screen is not going to navigate anywhere for now. And I'm gonna add the parameter to the function, and now I have it over here. And I can now now we have something here showing red because this is a preview. It doesn't have a nav controller pass, but we can mock it doing the following. Remember nav controller, and it's gonna be working again. And inside the nav control and inside our button on the on-click listener, let us add the nav controller to navigate. Now, what did we call our second screen? We called it second screen. It's important to use the same name and not have a typo, otherwise the app is going to crash. And now when we click on the button that says click me, it's going to be redirecting me to this screen. And we can go ahead and run the application. And it's gonna take some time to run due to the changes. Okay. And now it's running. So now our first screen is displayed as it is, as we did not make any changes there. And on button click, it's redirecting us to the second screen. And you may have noticed that as the top text has changed. And now we have covered how to navigate between screens using the nav controller, and it's very easy and simple. And in case you're wondering why did I choose using the nav controller and not use like a different way, like without it? Why didn't I navigate without it? Or why didn't I create a new activity and navigate to a new activity? It's because this is a good practice, and there's some limitations, like if you don't use the nav controller. And one of the things is keeping track of the backstack. So remember our first screen? If I click back, I'm gonna be redirected back to it. Now, if I don't use nav controller and use a different way to navigate without it, if I click back, there's a high chance that I'm not gonna be able to get back to here and I'm gonna be kicked out of the application. As nav controller handles this perfectly and manages the backstack perfectly. And now let's talk a little bit about intents. So as we know, we have two types of intents in Android. One is explicit intent and another type is implicit intent. So one is used to navigate or start services or broadcast or even an activity inside your application. And mainly, most of the time, it's used to navigate between activities. And the other type of intent is simply used to handle things that are outside your application. As for example, redirecting the user from your app to the web browser that's built in by default. Or as an example as well, redirecting him to open the phone dialer or such. So let's take an example and check how we can open a web page through an intent. So first of all, we need to pass the context. We need to create context, local context.current. We need to get the context of the application in order to be able to call the intent. And then I'm gonna be creating a variable, calling it, let's say, URL web intent equals to intent, and I'm gonna open the brackets and say intent dot action. Let me import them so that the suggestion would show action. Okay, action view, and we need to pass the URL as well. So URI dot it's URI dot parse as well. Let me import it. So you can simply import it when it's read by hovering the mouse and clicking on import, and then import parse. And let's say we want to redirect to the Google website. Now this is still not going to work as we did not start our intent. So to start our intent, we need to call context and do start activity and pass the intent into it. Now let's change the name as the purpose is not just to click, but redirect me to Google web page as example, or redirect to Google web page as an example. So again, now it's gonna take some time in order to build. Okay. So we have our main first screen. We have the Hello Android and the Click Me. On button click, I'm navigated to the second screen, which says Welcome to the second screen, and redirect to Google web page. Now, when I click on it, it's gonna redirect me to Chrome, and now I am outside of my application. Now I am on the browser, and the web page that I passed the URL of has successfully opened. So that was a simple example on how we can use intents in Android. Now, let's take a look at some things that we could have done better a little bit in order to have a clean and maintainable code more than this. Now, part of the having clean code that we have done was already separating the screens, as each screen is in its own file and under a package called screens. So later on, if I come back after a long time, I can easily know where to find my main screen and the second screen. And one of the things that we could have done better, and it's not a good practice to use, is having the strings hard-coded like that. Now, imagine if I want to support multiple languages, am I going to hard-code them all this way? So what? Am I going to be having a condition and checking accordingly what's the device language and accordingly set the text? Of course not. That's gonna end me up with thousands and thousands of lines of code. So the right way would be to use the strings file, which can be found under the res folder, under the values. So we have a place for the colors as well, the themes, and we can create one for the diamonds. And the diamonds means the sizes and spacers, like the one we used here, the ton.dp. The map usually is for the app icons. The drawable is to where you include and place your images if your application displays images. So let's see how we can add the text inside the strings file instead of having it hard-coded like that. So from the best practices is, and the ways that we should handle our strings is by having them added in the strings file. And let's name it something useful. This is representing a hello welcome text, so I'm gonna call it hello text. Always make sure that you're giving your components, your functions, and everything proper IDs that represents what they actually do and mean. And now I can call it using string resource, and I'm gonna do R, and It's the package name and string, and gonna do hello text. So now my text is being referred from the strings file, and as you can see, it's still showing here totally fine. I can refresh that, and the same applies to the rest. Now we're gonna be wondering, since I have mentioned having the app translated, then where do I place the translations of my app? So simply you can go ahead and create a new value resource file, and you can take here locale, move it to here, and here you can go ahead and change your language, set your language, what language you're supporting it. So let's say I'm doing example Arabic. I'm gonna call it strings file because it's representing the strings, and it's created. And now, as we can see now, I have two strings file. One has AR, which stands for Arabic, and the default one, which is the English. So simply we're gonna be dragging and dropping these to here. And of course, the text here is not supposed to be in English. For example, it's gonna be Arabic. Let's try. And now the app name is not part of this. Let's have just the hello Android. Uh, let's say Arabic word, so it's also hello. And if we try now, let's also add this one. See now, if you have missed out a translation and the other translated file, other language file, the language is gonna be showing in red. And if there's certain string that you don't really want to translate it and you want to keep it, for example, in English, you can mark it as non-translatable. Now we will see how our everything related to text is being set to English because it's hard coded. However, everything else, however, the only text that we translated is going to show in Arabic once we switch our device language. So let's go ahead and change the language. Let's type language. And not this one. Why it's not showing? I think it was somewhere here. System, languages and inputs, languages. Add a language, and let's add the Arabic since we have translated the app to Arabic. And I'm gonna move it up. So now my system is Arabic, and now the application we created is going to take Arabic. Let's run it again to take our changes. So it's gonna take a little bit time, and now it's perfectly fine. As you can see, our click me is still displayed in English, and that's because it's hard coded in English. And our Arabic word that one we read from the strings file now is being set as Arabic. The way we have translated it here in the Arabic strings file. And if we move as well to the second screen, everything is showing in Arabic. However, if you have noticed that Arabic is a right to left language, so automatically our layout has changed. If you remember, and became taking everything to be starting from right to left instead of left to right, even though it's in English. So let me take it back to English and let's check it out again. And now you'll see how the Arabic text is not Arabic anymore and it's following the system language. As you can see, everything went back to left to right. So we see hello world again instead of the Arabic word. And if we click next, also everything is set to uh, left to right, and in English the same as the system. Now the other things are not going to be affected. Mainly the hello Android is the one that's affected because it is the only string that we added in the strings file. And basically, that was about having the project clean and readable and following some of the best practices. Now, there is something that people sometimes developer don't take into consideration, which is accessibility. It's very important to have our application accessible to everyone and make everyone included. As we know, we have people with visual or hearing impairments, so it's important to take this into consideration and create our applications to support these. And it could be as simple as adding a content description to our icons and images inside our application. And now moving on forward to the architecture. So, what is app architecture? So, app architecture is a way of having our code structure organized. And for Android, the most popular architecture and the most widely used is MVVM, which stands for Model View Model. Basically, app architecture is all about separating logic's concerns. So let's take a look at a diagram that would have a better explanation of it. So as we can see, we have a view, we have a view model, and we have a model or a repository. So as we can see, the views and the models are constantly communicating with the view model, and the view model at the same time is communicating with them. So it's acting as a mediator. So what's a model or a repository? So a model or repository, mainly it's what handles the communication between our app and gets the data. And as we know, we have two types of applications. Our apps can be either offline or online. So either work with internet or offline and sometimes both. So the model is responsible for getting the data either from the internet, and that's like from REST APIs or any other service, or locally if the data is stored local database, like for example room database or SQLite, or even shared preferences. And we have the view. The view, from its name, is very clear what it does and what it means. So a view means it handles and contains our UI. So all our UI components are part, and screens are part of the view. And the view model, it's acting like a mediator, and it can hold the data between the both and pass it. So let's take a quick example about how things actually work in a real project. So let's take as an example a login screen where we have a username and a password field and a button. So the user has entered his username and password, and once he was done, he clicked on the button to go ahead and log in. So when he clicked the button, he actually made an action. And that action was sent to the view model. It's like telling the view model, hey, I have these two fields, and I want you to go ahead and set them, make a request for me to log in, and bring me back the response or the state. And here the view model takes them and sends them to the repo. The repo does its work and calls the data source. You can say it's online or offline, local database, or uh, REST API, and then it gets the data. So once it gets the data, the view model gives it to the view, and here it can be a success or fail since it's a login. So obviously, it's most likely to be an online. So the state is returned to the view, and accordingly, it's triggered inside the view, and the user maybe is redirected to inside the application, and if the login succeeded. But if it fails, maybe we are going to display an error message for him saying maybe his username or credentials are wrong or anything else. And that was a quick overlook at Android app architecture basics. So now let's take a look at the resources and what's next. So what's next is for anyone who's willing to start his development and Android career or don't know, not sure where to get started. I'd highly recommend following Google official code labs as they are very detailed and have a lot of details inside of them, and they have even exercises which you can work on, and by the end of the code lab you are given the solution, and you can compare your work to what's the actual solution is. And there's a lot of resources online anyone can use to learn and get good and get the hang of Android app development, and one of them is actually YouTube. There's a lot of tutorials out there that can help you get started. And there's as well a lot of GitHub projects which cover a lot of the basics, which you can always take a look at and like take a look at others coding way, how other people think, how things are done, because in the end everyone is unique in his own way and each has his own coding style. So taking a look and exposing yourself to others code is actually very beneficial and can help you a lot building yourself as a developer. And one way as well you can progress fast in development is being part of Android development communities. And for me personally, I have taken part in a lot of Facebook groups related to Android development. And early on in my start of my career, like, and even in my university, whenever I needed help, the communities were really a great place to get help from. There is always someone who knows more and ready to help you out. And even you can go ahead and contribute to others and try helping them. As even when you look into others' problem and try to solve them out, you are actually also gaining a new experience and being exposed to more functions, features, and things you did not and have not known before. And mainly that's it on how you can get started as an Android developer and the resources you can find and get the benefits from. And let's not forget, since we are in 2025, AI, ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever AI it is, it's very helpful and can help you a lot getting started if whenever you face problems. However, don't over rely on it because it's not gonna be good. Because if you over rely on it, sometimes it's gonna mess up. You're gonna sometimes spend hours and hours on a simple solution. So I suggest you, in case you face a problem, to try fix it yourself and look online for help, and finally try and resolve it through AI. So that is it. Do we have any questions? I think I'm unable to see the yes.
Okay. Okay, wow, that was such a great session. Do you guys have questions? This is your chance to ask.
Let us give them a few more minutes in case they're typing on the chat box, and then we'll proceed to our closing.
Yes. So someone is asking, what steps should I take to grow into a top tier Android developer? So in order to get into a top tier, to become a top tier Android developer, I'd suggest to practice a lot, build your portfolio, uh, build as much projects as you can, but as well make sure that you're not just creating projects without any quality, as quality in the end is what matter and not quantity. Like if you create 10 projects and they're all similar, it's not gonna take you anywhere. But if you create a project and take into consideration advanced stuff, like as we said, implementing MVVM, taking into consideration best practices, and as well some advanced concepts like the DI dependency injection and some advanced concepts like coroutines and such. These are a big add-on. And the best way to grow, as for me personally, I have learned and grown a lot through taking part in Android communities, through helping others and being helped early on in my career. So someone is asking which platform is better for beginners to start building apps, Android or iOS? It really Android and iOS are starting to be somehow similar, as both are starting to have the concept of creating UI using code. Like we have Compose for Android, and there's now Swift UI for iOS. But it's not more about which is better, as each has its pros and cons. For example, if you want to build apps for iOS, you are limited to having a MacBook. You are limited to have iOS devices. However, for Android, you don't really need these. You can start on with a simple laptop and any Android device. Is it possible to create a single app that works on both Android and iOS devices? Like I mentioned earlier, there is something called hybrid app development. So that's like Flutter, React Native, and even now we have the trend going on for Kotlin multi-platform, where you use only a single language to develop for both platforms. But however, a lot of people don't take into consideration or note that even if you're using hybrid app development, like even if you are using Flutter to make iOS and Android apps, you still need a MacBook to develop for iOS. So always keep that in mind. But yeah, the code base is the same and it's gonna be one. When you work the Android Studio, it's busy and the interface looks complex. Is there other tools that's easy than it? I did not really get that question. But if you mean if there is a different IDE to use other than Android Studio, then there is Visual Code. But Android Studio is like officially the official IDE for Android.
Okay, I think that's it. I'm not seeing any other questions. Well, now to the closing. Thank you so much, Maha, for your insightful session. It was really, really helpful for most of us, at least for me. Now I will do the honors for Abigail, which is today's co-host, to do the closing.
Okay. A big thank you again to our guest Maha for the valuable insight. We learned so much today, from native Android developments to deep dive in navigation, translation language. We learned a lot. So you even advised us to reach out to Android communities when we need it, which is a big plus for me. So thank you so much for joining us and taking the time to share your experience. We appreciate you, Miss. I need noises. Come on, guys. I need applauses. Yes, yes. Okay. So, unless anyone has a question, we will now say goodbye to our guest. More applauses.
Thank you so much, Maha. It was very nice.
Thank you for having me here. Thank you for your efforts as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. As